Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash. Double honors, the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth in sincerity. And shout out to Yakims out there in the four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, last night, if you had tuned in to see, to listen to what, DJ Chump, Nero 47 had to say, you thought he was going to brief you on the war. And he didn't. No. He just spat off a bunch of bullshit about fair elections. Who gives a shit about goddamn elections when you're in the midst of World War III? And you're destroying infrastructure, you're destroying power plants, and you're threatening to hit nuclear facilities, is bringing you to the brink of World War III, and all you're talking about is the bullshit 2020 election. You know? To anybody who actually wasted their time with it, he didn't give any briefings whatsoever on it. Not that we expected him to give you information about what sites he's going to hit and all that, but boy, he brags about that all the time. We're going to hit them like never before. We're going to blow them to the likes of which nobody has ever seen before. You've heard that over and over again, right? So infrastructure is being destroyed, and bigger infrastructure now. Now they're going after waterways, they're going after power plants, they're going after everything he said that he was going to do last is now happening. So I guess he's already hit them with everything. Oh, their Navy's already destroyed. Their Air Force is already destroyed. And most of their missile stockpiles are gone. That's what he's telling everybody, right? But, he didn't talk about any of those things last night. Nope. But, like everything else, though, he's also planning a ground invasion. Chris Green has already reported on it, as well as others are reporting that indeed, and they're actually hearing from I believe Larry Johnson is actually saying that, yeah, they're planning a ground invasion within the next little while. So this hitting of infrastructure and all that to knock power out is actually starting to make sense, because they are planning ground invasion. They plan to take the islands from Iran. They're actually going to go through this suicide mission, which, as you know, even if they could weaken Iran, Russia's going to send in troops. They're going to send in troops into Tehran. They're going to send in troops into the southern area. They're not going to let Iran fall. So, well, you already know that, anybody who's being deployed over there is ready to die. And a lot are going to die. Welcome to the next phase of the war. They're calling it the Battle for Hormuz. Although these strategic places, he's never going to get Hormuz. But now you've got also Saudi Arabia and Yemen in the fight as well. So we're looking at another strait being closed, as a result of the attacks against Sana'a Airport and the retaliatory strikes against Saudi-backed forces, which are backed by Donald Trump. He gave them the green light to go there. This is all that's just happened in the past few days. He didn't talk about none of those things last night. No, just a bullshit 2020 election about how, there's election security and you can believe in Babylon. They're the greatest place on earth, which I think that doesn't matter who the president is at this point. Well, it does and it doesn't. In the essence of World War III, it's already here. Nobody can stop this now. It's inevitable. See, it has a due date. And we believe Trump is where he's at. Salakia about the sun, but that just, it's very hard. Very hard to find a place. You know how these summers are, and it's going to get a lot hotter. We're just in the peak of it, in the midst of July, right? And like everything else, though, this ground invasion, if it's going to be within the next couple of weeks, good luck with that. Because now you're dealing with hellacious heat. I think that it's looking like it's towards the end of the year, but they're already talking about it. And Senator Larry Johnson, I believe, is breaking that news. But then you got other things that are going on, right? Pretty much so. Like toast, Babylon the Great will soon be toast. So it doesn't even matter about the so-called elections. That's just an illusion anyways, to give you the idea that you voted. But what if your guy doesn't get in there? What if they've already selected the next president? Because he's trying to say that Biden getting in there was fraud. It looked like it was. These things are rigged anyways, and it doesn't even matter anyways about that. Who cares? Trump is in charge now anyways. So what does it matter about that? But that's all he had to talk about. I think that he doesn't want to face the public scrutiny on the, and it doesn't even look like there's any reporters or anyone else in the room anyways when he had made that speech. But he didn't want to disclose, what his goals were for Iran. I think he's just going to be behind a computer desk and just tweeting back and forth, about how, oh, we'll blow them the likes of which never seen, or if you get a small little interview, he'd be like, oh, I'm not dealing with them anymore, they're scum, So you're just going to have tit for tat. But like everything else, though, they wanted a war, and they got one, and Trump has opened Pandora's box and can't get out of it. The least the flock shall draw them out. We're seeing that play out, Not to mention, it's done one thing. The reserve stockpiles are gone as of Wednesday, right? They're not even talking about that, and I no wonder why Trump didn't want to talk about any of those things, because stockpiles are gone. But they're not telling the people that. Yeah, the reserve stockpiles are gone. But here's what's going on. Infrastructure for infrastructure. Waterways for waterways. Bridges for bridges is what's going on, because, of course, Operation True Promise 5 is out, since this re-aggression.
Welcome in, everyone. I hope you guys are doing great wherever you're watching from today. I'm filming this on July 17th. All information is up to date as of July 17th, and Iran has carried out a horrifying attack against a water desalination plant. And this is the tripwire, the red line. This changes everything. We are now going to enter a completely new stage of the war following this attack. On top of that, U.S. strikes continue to pound bridges across Iran. We have all the updates, all the information. We're going to break it all down. Before we do, as always, please make sure to like and subscribe.
So there you go, man. Bridges being hit. Totally different part of the war, right? You welcome to the next phase, right? And like everything else, so, they... are going to pretty much be knocking everything out, right? And so radar systems have already been knocked out. Iran has already disabled most of the radar systems, which is why their missiles are hitting so hard, because they've already taken out all those systems in place. So all the weapons are depleted. So the only thing that's really left is send troops in. So the ground invasion is impending. We'll just see how much more tit for tat there can be. But if you have no bases to launch from, or they're so critically destroyed, and then you got nothing but infrastructure to hit, and that's what's happening. Now they're just destroying infrastructure, because you can't weaken the people of Iran. That doesn't work. But you can destroy their infrastructure in all hopes to try to weaken them. But at the same time, though, blowing up the bridges and all that, okay, you're destroying supply lines. Are you seriously ready to combat jets, and cargo planes coming in from Russia, when Russia can just wipe everything out anyway? See? Because like everything else, so Russia and China are not going to let it fall. But you notice that last night, though, unfortunately, last night they were just talking about nothing but the Chinese meddling, right? Not the Israelis meddling in elections, which we all know that indeed AIPAC, Senator Lindsey Graham, all those people were put in by Amalek, but no, it's not the Israeli state. No, not the Israelis. It's China. That's all he ever talks about. He talks about how wonderful his fucking tariffs are, and that, they wouldn't even cover me, because I was going to talk about election meddling. They didn't want to top the subject. That's all that he talked about for like 20 minutes of his bullshit. Oh wait, it's not bullshit, it's Trump shit. So that's all that he did. He ain't telling anybody anything, because let's face it, it's a failed war to begin with. And more people are gonna die because of his shit talking. Between him and King Bibi, all the shit talking is just gonna launch it into further escalation. It's spilled over. I already know about the idea that Syria has an older deal with the Israeli state to take northern Lebanon. So Trump's still trying to push that forward. But King Al-Jalani, I don't think you can call him king, but pretty much so, he said he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to get involved with all that, to have to fight Hezbollah. Because he knows that Hezbollah is a stronger military. Syria doesn't have shit for a military because the Israeli state already blew it all up. Syria doesn't really have shit anymore. Yeah, Al-Qaeda might be running Syria, but they're so weakened now because of everything else that's been taken out. And not to mention all the other things, they've just barely gotten restarted. So they ain't got shit, so they're not going to be able to help. No. And like everything else, though, Gomer and all its troops, well, they're not on the side of the Israeli state. They're actually against the Israeli state. So you got Amalek versus Amalek over there. Yeah, the Turks, well, they know they're about to be invaded soon. And so this war has definitely expanded, you see. And Russia is going to be sending in more and more troops. We already heard about, Russia already sending in troops into Lebanon earlier this year, and even more enforcements coming in towards other countries, right? Because he's going to be a guard unto them. And like everything else, the United Arab Emirates, who's recently, purchasing S-400 systems. Now the U.S. is looking to sanction the United Arab Emirates and these power moves. So a lot of these allies that are allied with the U.S. are starting to reconsider, because they're in the midst of this war. But eventually they'll all be Confederate, and they'll all get together with Russia to go after the Zionists, because Babylon the Great will find itself isolated and alone and desolate out there. They're going to be in that desolate wilderness, and they're going to be destroyed. The sound of their noise was heard in the Red Sea, which that's right there by the Suez Canal and all those other areas, So, the Red Sea is also another term for Saudi Arabia area, and that's where this desolate wilderness is going to be. So mass casualties are everywhere, and these troops, they ain't coming back, while everybody, is distracted, right? Because he didn't talk about none of those things. Election fraud, so what? Democrats versus Republicans, so what? This whole place is about to be lit up. And on top of that, though, you're going to see real, true famine hit. When things are not getting to the stores and the storehouses being found empty, that's about the time we're about to enter into. Right now, everybody thinks that everything's great, but they're going to see spikes, They're talking about, once the Suez Canal and that whole strait over there, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it starts with a B. Once that strait is closed, you've got two straits closed, the Strait of Hormuz and the strait over there. So guess what? No supplies will be coming. So they've been talking about another route, which would take even longer to go through, which is through Syria, Iraq, and on up through Turkey into the Mediterranean. Good luck with that, because again, Iran can still hit in the Mediterranean, especially, areas like that if they want to. But like everything else, though, this is, mostly to weaken the U.S. Have you become as weak as we, right? Because all the stockpiles are gone. I mean, Biden said that we're out of ammo, and he was saying that during the Ukraine conflict, which, that in itself has depleted a lot of their stocks. See, all this stalling of a memorandum of understanding, it's all backfired because they've already gone through so much, defense stuff, and the Israeli state has barely been hit. So they've already been exhausted. So that's why you're not really seeing the Israelis doing joint attacks. You're seeing mostly the U.S. do the fight for them while they're going and fighting in Lebanon, right? But they're still trying to get others to do it. See, the Israeli state really ain't doing much because guess what? The IDF has really been hit hard, because Hezbollah has been fighting back hard. And so have Yemeni armed groups. You see, the axis of resistance is a lot stronger, and it's too much to chew off. That's why they're just getting the U.S. to do all their fighting. That's why they're talking about combining the IDF with the U.S. In other words, U.S. troops will be in the Israeli state. U.S. troops will be in Lebanon. U.S. troops are going to be in Syria and Iraq. So woe be unto thee, right? Babylon and Asia. Well, where is Babylon? Oh, ancient Babylon is in Iraq. So, yeah, you're going to see more troops in Iraq because, they never left, right? And then there's talks about the Kurds, that they've been trying to rearm Kurds, but, Iraq told them no. And as well as Turkey had a lot to do with it. So all this tit for tat going on. And that's what's going on in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So it's here, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is Yahweh's judgment. It's coming. Day of the Lord, Yahweh Hashem, is drawing near in the Valley of Decision. So we're seeing a lot of things pick up. And yet we got more false teachers out there. They aren't teaching what the MOTB is. Yeah, see, that's around the corner too. Oh, you don't see it yet because the economy hasn't crashed fully yet. Well, you're starting to see the beginnings of it. Just wait. Just wait till it starts hitting, because it's going to take some time. It doesn't mean that it's fully out just because Wednesday's deadline is there. But slowly but surely, that's how they're going to get everyone, because it's going to catch them unexpectedly. They're not telling everybody that all the stockpiles are used up. You know, you're not going to hear about that on Fox News or any of the others, but you will if you listen to Kim Iverson and others, right? They'll tell you. But a lot of people do watch the alternative media. And so here we are, you know. We're still going out there and teaching day in and day out. We're still doing in-home lessons. Where are all the other groups warning about this, right? Where are all the other Israelite groups warning about prophecy? They're not even really talking about prophecy, right? They're talking about things that don't even matter. You know, it said as the day of the Lord Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai draws near, that there would be strong delusion, you know, and there'd be many false teachers, you know. So he gave us an outline as to what to look for, you know, seeing part of the signs past, which we've been told before, right? You know, but Yahweh Shai also said it in Matthew chapter 24, because 2nd Esdras and Matthew 24 kind of back each other, you know, as to the things that are going to be taking place. I mean, we all know the main passage in Matthew chapter 24, but we got to reiterate it because we're starting to see that, right? Right now you got floods going on all over the place in Texas. You know, there's some flooding going on. Then you got wildfires everywhere, right? You know, so part of Babylon's burning and part of Babylon is flooded. Major, you know, state of emergency is called. You know, so its infrastructure is totally wiped out. You know, so here we go, though. You know, Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, right? You know, you know this passage pretty well. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the signs of thy coming and of the end of the world, the end of the age, Esau Edom, the end of Esau Edom? When will this take place, right? You know, so like everything else, though, Yahweh Shai gave a guideline as to what was going to take place before his return. And Yahweh Shai answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Hamashiach, and shall deceive many. You know, claiming to have the truth, and they don't. Liars, false teachers. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So like everything else, though, you know, before the end happens, you're going to see all these things taking place. And we've been in this area for a while. It's just going to pick up. It's going to accelerate. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. And we hear all that all the time. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So, not quite yet. There's still more. The MOTB has to be mandated through all those things, you see. You know, and how are they going to do that? Gradually. But that gradualism is picking up. Because once you've got a crisis in place, see, like everything else, though, you know, they're just going to, you know, from crisis to crisis, you know, and just more demands, right? You know, because the people are going to demand more, you know, that the government do something, right? Because there's chaos everywhere, all over the streets and everything, and they're going to demand that the government do something about it, and that's when they're going to come in, you know. And, of course, they're going to enforce lockdowns, and they're going to police everything. That's what's about to take place. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, you know, deliver you up before the courts, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. So like everything else, though, we're going to be brought before trial, and a lot of us are going to be executed in this faith, you know, and that is for not taking the MOTB. See, that's going to come. The hour of temptation will come, and a lot of us will be martyrs for not taking it, but we're not going to be tempted to take it. We're not going to be tempted to get it. Some of us will be given safe passage. We're going to eat in those times. We're going to have resources, because the ultimate idea is to drain all the resources, to get rid of all of it, you know. And like everything else, so people are putting their faith in these elections and thinking, oh, well, we'll just get them in the midterms. We'll just get them here. You know, when has that ever worked? You know, it's just that things are escalating. You can't get rid of this guy. They tried to impeach him in the first term, right? How much more in the second term is he just going to laugh? Well, he just changed a bunch of the rules, right? He's supposed to release information that indicates that China interfered in the election. I thought he blamed the Democrats for saying that the Chinese I thought the Democrats, this is hilarious. Okay, so it's a reversal. Okay, the 2016 election, what happened? Oh, the Democrats said that China interfered. And now Trump is saying that China interfered, right? It's like, why would China want the Democrats? Why would China want the Republicans? You see, it doesn't even make any sense. So, that's just it. They'll get people distracted upon that. And of course, he went on to, talk about illegals, because this is a fierce king and cruel lord, getting that division up there. Well, he's got all the people distracted with that bullshit, with that Trump shit. He doesn't even have to fucking talk about the war, does he? The fact that they're losing, that people are fucking getting killed over there. And a lot of the retaliatory strikes, there's more people fucking killed in those than what they're telling the people, right? Their bases have been completely demolished. And like everything else, though, who do you think's in those bases? You think that they were just hiding under bunkers? The places have been obliterated by Iran. So they're not going to be able to rebuild. So most of the troops are in Saudi Arabia. So that's the desolate wilderness that the Most High spoke of, in the last days. And we know that's going to be there. Hey, man, Apostle Tahar has been teaching for quite some time, on down. And we've been teaching the same thing, following in Apostle Tahar and the Apostles' footsteps, right? Teaching the same thing, being in one accord, Because here it is, though. We're seeing that because where were they sending all the troops to invade Iraq? They were coming in from Saudi Arabia. So this is the place where they have to invade Iran because they have to go further. But they're going to push into Iraq and Syria to try to go after Iran. And they're going to have all the mess. It's going to become a huge clusterfuck. And then Russia's going to enter their troops in too because they have deals with Iraq and Syria as well. Yeah. And Lebanon and Turkey. So it's going to be a huge battle, right? It's better known as the Battle of Armageddon. Armageddon. Which means the mountain of troops. Multitudes in the Valley of Decision. We're seeing it. We're seeing the formation, right? So like everything else, though, 2nd Ezra chapter 16 also goes into this, about this final woe that comes. And where is it going to be? Well, it tells you, right? 2nd Ezra chapter 16, it reads, "Woe be unto thee, Babylon in Asia." Well, Babylon in Asia is talking about Iraq. In this particular passage is talking about Iraq. So inside Iraq, woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria. And another place, another term for Babylon the Great is Egypt. So indeed, it's talking about, U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria, right? That's where they're going to be gathered to fight Iran, to fight the Turks as well, and to fight the Russians. That's where this war is going to take place. Gird up yourselves with clothes of sack and hair, and bewail your children, and be sorry, for your destruction is at hand. And ultimately, once this becomes nuclear, Damascus gets taken away from being a city and becomes a ruinous heap. Because eventually the missiles start flying, because there's going to be casualties everywhere. A sword is sent upon you, who may turn it back? Okay, now let's talk about the nuclear part. When it becomes a nuclear war. That's what's about to take place in that valley. Eventually this will become nuclear. You're already hearing about the U.S. threatening to attack their nuclear power plants. So if they actually attack the nuclear power plants and there's a huge explosion, it's become a nuclear war. There will be retaliation. It's just a matter of how Damascus ceases in that day, but also Babylon ceases in that day. Plagues are sent upon you, and who is he that can drive them away? May any man drive away a hungry lion in the wood, or may anyone quench the fire in stubble when it hath begun to burn? So it's a rhetorical question. May anyone turn again the arrow that is shot of a strong archer? And that's once these missiles are deployed, the deployment systems, these S-400s, S-500s. They're not just anti-missile systems. They can launch nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles. And there's 200 million hypersonic missiles out there. And Iran has hypersonic missiles as well. Are they armed with nuclear warheads? I don't think that they need them. But you got all kinds. And Turkey has the equivalent of Oreshnik missiles as well. So all these missiles are going to be coming. The mighty Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai sendeth the plagues, and who is he going to drive that can drive them away? It's rhetorical. Nobody's going to be able to. A fire shall go forth from his wrath, and who is he that may quench it? So nobody can quench the fire that's going to be in stubble very soon. So, yeah, Babylon the Great, is going to be fighting in Iraq and Syria against Iran and Turkey and all those other places, Russia and all its troops. See, all those troops are going to be gathered there. But eventually it's going to become nuclear. You know, and as all that happens, of course, they're going to be what they're fighting over is who has their place in the new world order, right? This battle for Hormuz is about 20% of the global oil trade, but all that's about to come to a halt very soon because the reserve stockpiles are gone, the strait ain't moving, and well, you're talking about invading islands and everything else. Well, they're not really. That wasn't supposed to be public, but Senator Larry Johnson's already been talking to others, so it is being talked about on the alternative media. And it's no wonder why Trump didn't even want to fucking talk about that. Because he's been humiliated. Iran has fucking kicked his ass and wiped out just about everything he can do. You know, and they've called their bluff on everything. So, you know, be ready because Babylon the Great's about to lose a lot more. It has only just begun. So hopefully, and as I said when Trump first got into office again, I said, you ain't seen nothing yet. Well, you start to see a little bit of it, but the best is yet to come. So hopefully this has all been edifying for them. We'll say, Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Wa Abal Babal. Brakatum, Yehovah Elect, Shalom.